Welcome to um, this lecture, or really, it's a special assignment that I've been doing for a number of years, which I think is one of the most important applications for mathematics in all of our lives, and that's about how we our strategies for financial success. And most of us have some struggles in some area or another about making good choices, etc. So I want to kind of talk through those different elements of financial um, literacy and what we call financial savvy. So I'm starting here with a quote from Bill Gates. If you're born poor, it's not your mistake, but if you die poor, it's your mistake. And I think what he's saying is that this knowledge, this financial knowledge, it really isn't brain science or brain surgery or rocket science. It's actually quite simple concepts that most of us just don't pay attention to, or we get emotionally hijacked. And so I've titled this Your Money or Your Life, which is actually the name of a book that I read, and the authors are here. The subtitle is Transforming Your Relationship with Money and Achieving Financial Independence. While a lot of this is more practical information, I think that this book, it's been very helpful to me, and it was really an eye-opening experience. So I wanted to include that here. Okay. So our objectives here, here's a copy of the book that I have, is to understand basic financial concepts, the time value of money, risk, savings, investing, simple interest, compound interest loans, etc. These are things that whether we are aware of it or not, we are impacted by throughout our lives. And if we don't have that learning, and I think the earlier that we have the learning, it's more important because we can make changes in our life, even if they're small changes. Over time, they become incrementally bigger. I also want to hopefully they help you understand some financial tools and strategies, whether this be something called the TVM, the Time Value of Money Solver app on your calculator, budgeting, investing. Banks are a tool, a financial tool and strategy. Credit unions, certificates of deposit called CDs, high yield savings accounts, leasing versus buying. All of these are different tools and strategies. And then I'm hoping you become motivated to make immediate changes and plan for future changes or future strategies for financial success. So this is kind of a launching point to give you some basics and hopefully maybe create some hunger for some more. So there is a worksheet that accompanies this video. It's in eCampus. You should open this. You can fill out this application, or application, what am I saying? You can fill out this worksheet. It is an assignment that I give extra credit for. And at this point, I want you to go through and stop the video. Make sure you open the document. And you see there's just a self-assessment here, a number of statements, and just rating them 1 through 5. 1 is strongly agree, 5 is strongly disagree. There's not many, there's about 10 there, and then just do an average. So hit pause and complete this worksheet. Again, there's two concepts we're talking about here, and that is financial literacy. And financial literacy is just having the basic knowledge of the financial tools and forces that play a role in our lives. So that's kind of the talk. Do we know what people are saying? Are we aware of these things? And then we have financial savvy. Okay, financial savvy is the walk. And there were some parts of financial literacy that I was well aware of. I had an aunt who was a banker her whole life, eventually was a president of the bank, etc. And she gave me some good advice around credit cards that I knew was her advice. And I knew it was good advice, but I didn't take it. So while I had the financial literacy, I wasn't financially savvy enough to take her advice. And this is what I call the talk, but not the walk. It's easy to talk the talk, but walking the walk is a little bit more difficult. And part of that is all this stuff around our finances. And in my opinion, it's about the emotional attachments we have and the beliefs about that and entitlement, etc. Okay. So hopefully you've taken that first step and we'll move forward. This is not going to be a long exercise, and hopefully you'll find it interesting and valuable. The one thing I will say is that I say this in class when I'm teaching this. I absolutely wholeheartedly believe that I would be anywhere from $250,000 to $1 million richer if I had the financial literacy and the financial savvy, if I had the understanding and I actually used the understanding. And I'm not talking about big things, I'm talking about understanding the time value of money and saving money for future early on in our careers and lives, and also about things like credit cards that really weigh us down and make it hard to make choices later on. So we're going to go talk through some of that. But I believe if I, again, was financially savvy and literate when I was in your seat, I would easily be $500,000 to $750,000 richer, if not even $1 million richer. And that's just from credit cards and homes, etc. All right. So what is financial literacy? So this is from Finance Strategists. The idea of financial literacy is these different concepts. Knowing about budgeting and expense management, creating a plan for spending and saving based on your income and expenses, and then using that plan would be the savvy part. Saving and investing, setting aside money for future use, and growing wealth through investments. Um, Warren Buffett is keen to say that as early as possible, you should be trying to find passive income. Most of us understand income as what we get paid for doing a job. We work at Starbucks, we work as a teacher, we work as a nurse, etc. But passive income is the money you make even when you're not working. Maybe you've bought a home and you lease it out. You're a landlord now. And so while there is some work there, it's not a 9 to 5 job. That asset is earning you money. Putting money into an interest-bearing savings account, that money is increasing whether you're working or not. And so again, the earlier we start making those investments, the better off we're going to be later on. Debt management, this is a huge thing, especially around credit cards, understanding and managing debts efficiently. Retirement planning, preparing for our life after work, and even just thinking about it. When would you like to retire? When would you like to not work? Maybe a lot of people think 65, etc., is the retirement age. Now it's 67 officially for Social Security. But maybe you want to retire early. Maybe you want to have enough money at 40 or 50. And so now is the time that you can make that thought or that plan and see what it takes. And it may take less than you think. Insurance and risk management, how to protect yourself against financial setbacks. We know about car insurance, house insurance, etc., health insurance. These are all things that kind of protect us financially as well as protecting those assets. And then finally, understanding financial products. And what this means is not only just like a savings account or an investment account at a brokerage, but it's also things like understanding interest rates, understanding inflation, understanding savings accounts, derivatives, money that's paid out to you from accounts like even savings account. The money you get each year, your interest earned is considered a derivative. Um, a lot of people know generally what inflation is. It's anywhere, typically it's under 5%, 2 to 3%, etc. So if you put money in a savings account and it's earning less than inflation, you're not actually making any money, right? Because the cost of things are going up 3% while your money in the bank is only going up, let's say 2%, etc. So those are the ideas of financial literacy. The World Economic Forum believes that only about 50% of U.S. adults are financially literate, and meaning that they have a good basic understanding of the financial tools and forces that play a large role in their life. And beyond that, I'd say that the savviness, the first thing you have to do is understand, right? Understand the talk. What are these places? The second thing is making choices, and sometimes those aren't easy choices, um, especially in the world that we live in. We are constantly bombarded with media that's encouraging us to buy, and that is really, in my opinion, wrapping up our own self perception, not only in what we do and who we are, but also in the things that we buy and have. And so, it takes a lot of intention and attention, I think, to move from literacy. So, are you financially savvy? This is a 2024 um, survey from the Fifth Third Bank, and it said that 48% of Americans consider themselves financially savvy. So a little less than half of the people in America think that they're not only know what's going on, but they are also walking that talk. 45% know they should set aside 20% of their income for savings. Okay, this is part of the savviness, setting aside at least 20% of your income. More than half of Americans know an emergency fund should hold 6 months of living expenses. 25% of Americans are debt free, and 46% agree retirement savings should begin in a person's 20s. Okay, that used to happen automatically with jobs. When I started work in the late 80s, early 90s, every job had a pension, and that was just automatic. So most of us were starting full-time jobs in our 20s, so we were automatically saving for retirement. That was just part of the corporate setting. But most people aren't putting these theories into practice. For example, there's a big gap between literacy and savviness and practice. 70% of Americans currently have some form of debt. That may be a car loan, a house loan. We don't usually kind of think of as debt. We tend to think of house loans as investments. Credit card debt is probably the hugest there, but there's all kinds of debt. What's even more concerning is that 30% of those in debt have no plan to pay it off. I have a family member that was a single mom at some point, and we have to be careful of the stories we tell ourselves. The story she used to tell all the time was that as a single mom, she relied on the credit card to make ends meet. But she never changed that story after her children were older and out of the house, and she never got out of that credit card debt all the way through to retirement. So be careful of the stories you tell yourself. 2/3 of respondents do not have 6 months of living expenses saved in an emergency fund, and 30% of people don't have any extra money for emergencies at all. And then more than half of the respondents, more than half, do not contribute to a 401k, an IRA, which is an individual retirement account, or any other retirement plan. So half of the people have no retirement plan, assuming they're paying their taxes, they're paying their Social Security. Then half of the people in America are relying on Social Security for their pension, and that's a scary low amount. The time value of money, specifically in my classes, I often talk about how college students hate math classes. And so these TI-84 calculators are the cheapest calculator to buy secondhand, because as soon as college students finish their math requirements, they sell the calculator that they needed for their math requirement. In my classes, the majority of them require this calculator. And there's an app on here. If you go to the app button here, which is 3 above the 7, and hit enter, you'll see the first app is the TVM, time value of money. I think it's financial and then time value. Go to that app and then you'll see all these fields. The time value of money is the concept that the money available today is worth more than that same amount of money will be in the future due to its potential earning capacity. That's the idea that if you put $1,000 in a savings account today, it's going to be worth more in a year, 2 years, 10 years, etc. Or if you just put that money, if you just hold on to that money and you don't put it in something that's earning interest or giving you a dividend and paying you some way, then the future value is reduced because of inflation, etc. Understanding the time value of money is crucial for financial decisions like investment, lending, and budgeting, taking loans on or investing money, saving, and certainly having a budget and knowing where your money is going. So in this, the app here can calculate all those fields. The N is the total number of compounding periods or payments. If you're paying once a month, and this would be the number of years times 12. If you're paying every week, this would be the number of years times 52, etc. The interest rate, it's in as a percent. So if it's 20%, you would just put 20 there, divided by the number of payments you're making or the number of compounding periods in a year. So if you're making monthly payments and your interest rate is, let's say, 5%, then this is the interest rate per payment. So it would be 5%, which is the annual rate, divided by 12 months per year, so 5 over 12. The present value, this is the starting amount. Typically, if it's an investment account, this is 0, right? Because you don't have any money in there yet. And then you'll have some future value. It's possible that you just put $1,000 or $5,000 into an account, and that would be your starting amount. It's typical retirement accounts. You make payments, so you start at 0, but then you start making like monthly payments, etc. The future value is the ending amount. And then these PY and CY, payments per year and compounding per year, right now for the level we're talking about, we just leave those at 1. And then the bottom tells when you make that payment. Typically, if you make it at the beginning of the month or the end of the month. Okay. Now, if you're talking about investing, your present value is usually 0, and your future value is, what you end up with. If you're talking about like a loan, then your present value is the amount of money. Like, let's say we're talking about a car loan, and I put $5,000 down, but I still need to borrow $20,000 for the car. Then my present value is the $20,000 I owe that I borrowed, and then the future value should be 0 because that's when I've paid it off. And so then I can use this based upon interest rates or about money or whatever. Maybe I want to figure out how much money I can spend on a car, and I know I can do payments, let's say $400 a month, and I know what the interest rate is in my bank. Then I can figure out how much car I can buy before I go there. And this is really what we're talking about, is you being responsible for your financial decisions. So here we have, if Chris had $1,000, actually, I don't even think I did that example. That just kind of came with the graphic I got there. So I'm going to skip this example, but you can try it if you want to. The future value of a current asset. These are some time value of money terminology. Present value is the current value of a future sum. Interest rate is the rate of return. It's usually an annual. And then compounding periods is the number of periods which interest is compounded. Monthly quarter is 12 per year, quarterly would be 4 per year, annually be 1, etc. Annuities is anything when you make the same amount of money is transferred in the same period of time. So, for example, if you rent an apartment, your rent is an annuity. You pay your landlord the same rent every month, the first of the month, etc. Um, when you're working, your retirement, your pension fund is typically an annuity. Every time you get paid, you pay a percentage. If you're on salary, that's an equal payment made every paycheck, which may be every 2 weeks or a month. And then when you retire, that retirement becomes a flipped annuity. And what that means is now you get paid an equal amount every month from that money that you've invested. So what I want you to do now is hit pause, and this is going to be a longer pause. If you look in your worksheet, there are some activities to do that are really around learning from this website. www.tvmcalcs.com is a tutorial that's available. At first, I recommend you go through the introduction section that kind of goes into more detail about the time value of money and all these fields. And then it actually has a TI-84, a TI-83, an Excel calculator. It has a tutorial there. So I highly recommend you use those. Again, not just for the credit I'm giving you for this assignment, but if you know how to use your calculator and this TVM calculator, you are going to be so much better prepared for your financial future. You're going to really have a head start on financial. All right. So hopefully hit pause and go do that last exercise, and then come back when you're done. So our next thing, after you've hopefully learned about TVM calculations and the time value of money, let's talk about the biggest business that's connected to financing, and that's banks, right? That's where we put our money. But we get a little bit confused, especially if we listen to their advertising, that banks are businesses, and they, like any business, they have to be focused on making money. If they don't make money, they don't survive. Customer focus is important because they want to keep people happy, but truly in the area of finance, we're really kept more ignorant than happy. And that ignorance, they say ignorance is bliss. In our financial world, this is really, really true, in my opinion. Okay. Remember that the way that banks make money is on the interest you pay for their products and services, and sometimes you pay fees. So if you borrow money for a car, you pay interest to them. Your credit cards, they make a ton of interest on that. Bank fees, not so much, etc. They lose money, which really loses the wrong word, or have expenses in their operations. They have to pay the people that work there. And then when they pay you interest for savings. Okay? So there's different types of banks. And what I really want you to realize is that banks are not so much there to financially educate you. Because if you were really educated well, you wouldn't be picking the largest banks there are, which are the community banks. These are the banks that are in our neighborhood. These are the banks that we drive by. These are the Chases, the Wells Fargo. There's many more names. I just put the first two that came to mind. These are really convenient because they're close to our home, they're close to our work, they're close to the restaurants we go to when we need money for ATM, etc. But we are paying more for that convenience. So these cost us more, and when we invest through them, we make less money. For example, Chase savings interest, and this is the same, I believe, at Wells Fargo. The interest rate that I earn if I put money in saving is 0.01%. Okay, this is not 1%. Don't get confused by the rewriting 1% as 0.01. This is 0.01%. This is 1/100th of 1%. Okay, when you look at the credit card that I use, my Chase credit card has an interest rate greater than 20%. And typically, community banks have higher interest rates on other loans, house loans and car loans, etc. Okay? For this savings account, one of the ways that we measure the efficacy of a savings account is how long does it take, or any investment, is how long does it take to double your money. At 0.01%, it would take 7,000 years. That is not a typo. That is based on this interest rate. So if you're putting money in a savings account at Chase or most of the community banks, it's a waste of time. You are losing money. You are not saving money. You do have a pool of money to use, but you're not earning any money on that. Okay? Notice that the money that you borrow from them, when you use Chase's money by using your credit card, they charge you 20% on that. Notice that's 2,000 times the difference of what they pay us versus what we pay them for the money. And guess what? When you put money in savings, Chase is certainly going to use that money. They're going to make investments, etc., to try to earn money off of that so that they can pay you that 0.01%. And believe me, they don't have to do much to earn 0.01%. So another choice in banks are called credit unions. These will still sometimes be in our community. Locally here in North Dallas, we have RBFCU. I think it's Robert Brooks Federal Credit Union. There's also the Texas Credit Union, etc. There's not as many branches around. These do cost less to us, and they do pay us more. For example, the RBF's Federal Credit Union saving interest right now is 0.30%. The double time on that saving is 240 years. It's still a hell of a long time. None of us are going to see our money double. So this isn't a great interest rate, but it's a hell of a lot better. Notice it's 30 times the savings rate at Chase and most of our community banks. They do have lower credit card interest. Currently at RBFCU, I've done this video in 2025, by the way, it's November, starts at 12% and goes up. Chase starts at 20% and goes up. And they have lower loan interest rates. Credit unions are typically, they used to be affiliated with a type of job like a teacher's credit union, or a community, like we have Texas Credit Union now. They changed some of the rules, so there's a lot of more open. These two credit unions are open to anyone who wants to join. Before, you had to be like a member of something. Like I'm still a member of the first company I worked for, EDS Credit Union. Okay. So for credit cards, for your loan needs, maybe for your checking, credit unions tend to be more favorable to the people than our community banks, but again, they're less convenient. Okay. The last thing I want to talk about is high yield savings accounts, or high yield savings banks. These are banks like Open Bank, SoFi, etc. There's things like something called NerdWallet that rates these. You can just go online and look for rankings of high yield savings accounts or high yield savings banks. Most of these are online. They are heavily focused on the saving market, and they have great interest rates compared to our community banks and compared to our credit unions. These are mostly online only, and they are investment or saving focused. For example, right now, one bank savings interest is 4.2%, and this should say one bank, and it says Chase. So this is a typo. I just copied it over, and I need to change that. The current interest rate at one bank is 18%. So notice here the credit union does better for the credit card, but certainly for the interest on any savings, this is so much better. So the double time on this savings is 17 years, something that we could all see. And notice this is a 420 times the savings interest of Chase and the community banks. It's just ridiculous. And this is one of the huge mistakes I've made. Like even recently, I've been doing a lot of renovation projects. So I've been trying to save a lot of money, and I kept saving them in my community bank and wasn't even thinking that, I'm going to be saving this money for a couple years. And so I was getting average of about $2 or $3 of interest a year versus 1,000 or $2,000 in interest that I could have been earning those years. So it's just foolish for me to keep any savings here in a community bank versus a high yield savings bank. And these are very reliable. There are ones you got to be careful. Anything with the internet. But again, if you look at NerdWallet or other rating systems, you can see, like, for example, I don't know who SoFi is related to, but Open Bank is a subsidiary of Santander, which is a Spanish and Mexican bank. So the first thing is knowing where your money is and knowing what you're paying for those things and making good choices about this. And this is one of the easiest things to do, especially if you're starting to save money, is just open these accounts. And different saving high yield, some of them have fees. I use Open Bank. No commercial here. You may want to choose something else simply because it doesn't have a minimum balance and it doesn't have any fees associated with transferring money in or transferring money out. Okay. Let me see. All right. So the next thing I want to talk about is something called pseudo banks. Many companies like auto stores, furniture stores, or department stores offer banking products such as loans or credit cards, making your purchase easier and more convenient. But be careful. Again, you're paying for the convenience and the service right there, and you pay more for this. Typically, they have higher interest rates. I don't know about the credit cards for stores. Bank credit cards are so high, but I have a credit union, so my credit card is only about 12%, whereas like a store credit card is probably anywhere from 18 to 20 some percent. And also, they often come with high pressure sales strategies. The first thing is that you may have a higher interest rate if you rely on the car dealer or the furniture dealer for buying furniture, taking out a loan for this. You may be paying a higher interest rate. So it's always good to check with your bank or credit union first. All of these places focus on payment. They always focus on how much do you want to pay a month? How much can you afford to pay a month? And so what they'll do is they'll get your payment in a nice place, but what that does is they often make you pay it for a longer time. And so by having a higher interest rate and a longer loan, you may have a lower payment and be real excited. Oh, I've got this great new furniture for only $50 a month, but you're paying for it for 7 years. And in the long term, with that interest, you've paid, a lot more for the furniture than if you bought it for cash or if you had a slightly higher payment and paid it off more rapidly. So be careful. Finally, there's a lot of emotional manipulation with this. People are, especially when they offer these products, they're like, oh, let's see if we can get you pre-approved. Again, they keep you focused on the monthly payment and not the total payment. Every time you buy something, and especially if you buy it on credit, you want to figure out the total payment. It really helps you, especially if you're emotionally invested. Oh, I love this sofa. Oh, I love this car, etc. This can help you manage that emotional compulsion. What do car dealers say? Oh, well, if you want to sleep on it, that's okay, but I've had 2 other people call about this car today. Or they might say, well, I can drop 1 point off and 1% off your interest, but only if you do it today. Don't ever take those deals. And I usually tell people I don't like that kind of strategy. And if that's how you want to do business with me, I'm going to have to think about dealing with this company, not just this. I just don't like that high pressure sales. And so that usually gets them to back off. And I usually can think through things. One of the things that I do now, earlier in my life, especially around cars, I was much more emotionally engaged, but I never will buy a car on the first time I'm on a lot. I will always sleep on it for at least 24 hours and sometimes even longer. All right. So part 3 it's now time to go back to your worksheet and look for part 3, thinking of one good strategy for you to avoid being swept away by emotion on a big purchase. And the worksheet has fields for you to fill in, so you can just type it directly into the worksheet. I really am not looking for printouts that you send to me, pictures or whatnot. Okay. Hopefully you've gone back to your worksheet, you've completed that, and we can now talk about retirement. Retirement is all about time, and specifically the time value of money. Most of us, myself included, retirement seemed far away. I'll handle that later. Let's see the impact of that thinking. We saw earlier that I think it was half of the people don't even have a retirement account. I was lucky that when I started work, again, pensions were a normal thing. But after 10 years of working, I went and did some private work. I worked for myself, and I didn't keep up that pension or that investment in myself. And I lost a decade of retirement money. And that's made a huge difference in me trying to make up that amount and what I've had to do the last 10 and 20 years. So let's look at how this idea about procrastination and putting this off actually affect us. So Emily is 20 and she wants to start a 5% retirement account. She's thinking about maybe she's pretty sure she can do $10 a week, but maybe she could actually do $25 a week. So what she's going to do is she's going to pull out her TI-84 calculator and see what the value would be at 60. So I'm going to walk through these so you can kind of see, again, hopefully you've done the TVM calcs. So if she puts away $10 a week, that's $40 a month. So the number of periods, she's 20 years old. This is going to be in there for 40 years and times 12 payments a year. So 40 times 12 is the number of periods. The interest percent is 5%. That's the annual interest. We need the interest per payment or interest per period, which is 5 divided by 12. Notice again, this is an interest percent, not a decimal. It's got the percent there telling you to just write the number of the percent, not 0.05, but you'd write the percent number. The present value, we don't have any money in this account yet, so we're going to start with 0. The payment is the money we're putting in there each month. That's $40, 10 times 4. And the future value, this is what we want to know. We want to know the value of this account at 60. The PY and CY, we're going to leave at 1 for all this. You can, if you go in the TVM Calcs tutorial, they'll explain more about this. And then end or beginning is when we're going to make the payment, and we're going to make the payment at the end of each month. Okay, we're going to save $10 a week and then put it in this account at the end of the month. Okay, so when we do this, Emily's going to have $61,040, and that's just from putting $40 away in a 5% interest-bearing account until she turns 60. So she wants to compare that with $25 a week. So notice the only thing that's changed here, we still are doing 40 times 12. The interest rate is 5, still divided by 12 because it's a monthly payment. We still are starting at 0, but now we're putting 25 a week in, so this is $100 a month. So the payment is the only thing that changes. When you're using your using your TI-84 calculator, the way that you calculate these is you fill in all the fields, and you can even do this. You don't have to calculate 40 times 12 and then find that number and enter it. You can put 40 times 12 in that field, 5 divided by 12 in the I field, and it will calculate that for you. So then once you've got all of these entered, you go to the field you want and move your cursor there, and then you'll hit the green alpha button and the enter button, which is right beside it's the enter button. So you'll hit the alpha and enter, and that will calculate this field. So if she puts $100 away, she's going to have $152,000. So one of the things I'm showing you here is like this is about 2.5 times that the money she's putting away each month. Well, with the same interest, etc., then the end up money, the future value of that money is about 2.5 times what she put in, which just makes logical sense. And this is the intuitive part of investments and savings, etc. That if we put in more money, we're going to have more money at the end, and it really roughly works out to the same um, ratio, if you will. Okay. So now let's look at something else. Emily wants to wait 10 years to start to put that $25 in the 5% account because money is really tight. She's a student. She doesn't know that she's going to have an extra $25 every week. She's only working part-time, etc. So she still wants to calculate that value, but she wants to wait 10 years. Okay. So the only thing that's really different now, instead of, since Emily is 20 and she's going to wait 10 years, she's going to start at 30. So she's going to be putting that $100 away at 30 for 30 years times 12 payments a year. So it's 30 times 12 for the end. Notice everything else is the same. 5 divided by 12, the payment is $100. We start at 0, etc. So move your cursor to the future value field, hit the green alpha and enter button, and we find out that if she waits 10 years, which is only a quarter of the time, right? We're only taking 10 years off of 40. That's only 25% less time. Notice that she loses about half of that value. So just by waiting 10 years, she loses an incredible amount of money. And so this is why this is really one of the most important lessons about the time value of money, and why it's so important to start early. Even if you can only afford $25 a week or $20 a week, put that money in there, leave it in there, and it earns compound interest. Think of compound interest like a snowball that you put on top of the mountain. As it rolls down the mountain, it's getting bigger and bigger until it's a freaking blizzard. Okay, and that's what you want. You want a blizzard of money that you're investing. Start small, but over time it grows big. And notice the penalty. It's almost half. This is 75,000. She's almost lost half of the money by waiting 10 years. And that's the really important thing to learn about time. And that's why it's important to think about retirement now instead of waiting till you're 40. If you wait till you're 40, Emily only waited till she was 30 and she lost half the value. If she waits till 40, God, imagine what's going to happen then. A big thing now, companies used to offer private pensions, and now almost every company offers something called an IRA, an individual retirement account. This is the new pension scheme at most companies, okay? Typically, an employer will match up to 5%, okay? When you first go in and you sign all that paperwork, I remember when my son's girlfriend, she called me from their HR office. She's like, they keep asking me all these questions. I don't know. What is this IRA thing? They want to take my money? And I'm like, yes, give them your money. Okay. What does that mean? That means that for every dollar you put into your individual retirement account, your company will match that up to 5% of your income. So you want to do the maximum because that's actually giving you more money. If you put 5% in, notice you just got a 5% increase in your annual pay because they're giving you an extra 5% in this retirement account. So you get 5% less in your paycheck, but that 5% less in the paycheck becomes 10% invested in the retirement account. So you always want to max out your IRA contributions. Whenever HR asks, what do you want to put in there? Put the max in. You will figure out how to live. I'm telling you, you'll figure out how to live. Okay? So always max out that. All right? So what are the recommendations here? Max out your IRA deduction at work, like I just said. Save a minimum of 20% of income with maybe 10 to 15% for retirement. I know that's hard, but this is where you should start out, especially when you first start, really putting that money away. Your retirement goal is to have 10 times your annual salary by the age of 67. And I'm not sure where that calculation came from, but also you really want to start putting money into a retirement account when you're in your 20s. We can see what happened to Emily here from waiting from 20 to 30. She lost half of the value of her money in that time. Okay. So one other thing, maybe you think, God damn, 67, I want to retire a hell of a lot earlier than that. Well, there's something called FIRE, and FIRE stands for Financially Independent Retire Early. And this was a movement, I think it's been around for about 20 years, and it's about people living differently, getting out of the consumer, getting out of I got to have the best car, best house, etc., and figuring out how do they put a lot more away. And so typically what FIRE people do is they aim for to save 40 to 50% of their take home income and put that into savings or investments so that they can retire. I know I saw a documentary on a FIRE couple um, in Netflix, and I thought it was very realistic because this was a yuppie couple. They lived in like San Diego or San Francisco or something, and they heard about this FIRE thing, and they thought, God, imagine, at the age of 40 or 45, we no longer have to work. We can do what we want because we can live off of our money. And so they decided to do it, and it wasn't easy. I mean, they were driving Lexuses and BMWs, and there's one scene where the wife is driving a used Toyota or used minivan, and she just starts crying. She misses her car. She misses her life. So there are sacrifices there. But if you think about, at 40 being able to retire, all of a sudden you can do whatever the hell you want when you want and not have to go and only have, 2 weeks or a month vacation. So if you're interested in this, it's definitely worth looking up on YouTube or Google or anywhere. Look for FIRE or Financially Independent Retire Early. It's quite interesting. Um, so in your worksheet, I ask you to kind of do the same thing Emily did. Think about how much money you could save now. It may be $10 a week, maybe $20 a week, whatever you could save now. And then calculate the difference that it would be if you put the money away now and if you waited 10 years. And so figure out, if Emily was 20, so she had 40 years to 60. If you're 22, then you have 38. And then this, of course, would be 10 years less or 28, etc. So do that exercise. And just so you really get the feel for that. Hopefully that really, that this exercise and then that one really brings home the time value of money and the value. All right. So one of the things we can do if we're trying to be more financially savvy, again, hopefully you've gone and took care of retirement. I think is part 4. Exercise. If we look at the largest expenses we have, and transportation is the second largest expense most of us have. You might think of our cars, especially in the United States, almost everyone has a car. Cars are the second largest expense for most families after housing. In the United States, car culture has many think of cars not just as transportation, but really as an outfit or an accessory or something that says something about my personality and who I am. Buying a 1 to 3 year old used car, if you buy a used car versus a new, this saves around 20% if you wait a year. And this increases to 40 to 60% if you wait and buy a second or third year car. The average car payment in 2025 for if you're buying the car with an auto loan, it's usually 70 months at $749 per month if it's new, and about $529 used. If you lease a car, you're paying the average payment. These are average payments. I'm sorry, I got them off the internet. I like to source things, and I didn't do that for quite a few of these. I'm sorry. It's a typical lease is 24 or 36 months, and the average lease right now is running at $629. About 20 to 25% of Americans lease a car instead of buying. And the focus then is on the monthly costs, not the total cost of owning that vehicle. Some states, the percent of leasing is as high as 60%. These tend to be states in the Northeast where housing costs are much higher than they are in other parts of the country. Also, you have to realize that when you're doing leasing, this is not including insurance expenses. And if you buy an older car, especially a car that's at least 5 years or older, the insurance costs are significantly cheaper. Okay. Also, Americans change vehicles on average every 3 to 6 years. Vehicle reliability is estimated at 10 years for most cars, or more. So this is another area that I fell into the trap, if you will. Since I left college, I've had relatively good jobs, making a decent salary. And so I did calculate at one point that I got a new vehicle. I did know about used vehicles, and in all of my life, I've only bought one actual new car, and I did lease that one. Everything else has been a loan, and usually a 2 to 3 to 5 year old or older car. Um, but I did keep changing them. So, I fell in this car culture mindset. Um, the cars I own now, I've had for more than 15 years. Um, I haven't had a loan payment in more than 10 years. My current insurance for both cars, I have a convertible and I have a van, is like $35 a month. Of course, that's only, it's not comprehensive. They say that once your annual payment is 10% of the replacement cost of your car. So, like if you have an older car and if it's total, you're only going to get $5,000. If you're paying more than $500 a year for insurance for that car for comprehensive, they say that's a good time to only have liability. So if your car is wrecked, the insurance company is not going to buy you a new one, but the money you pay on the insurance year after year, because it's 10%, it's not worth having it. Okay. So what happened with me is, and I think this was a good strategy. I had a car. I had a car I liked a lot, and I did buy a car that I bought a car that was reliable. One of my early cars was a Saab convertible, and it was just hell on maintenance. And so the convertible I still have is a Toyota. It's been one of the best cars I've ever had. And I had some family visiting, and I needed a larger vehicle. And I thought, I owned my car outright. I didn't have a car payment anymore. And I wanted something that could haul stuff. And so I bought a minivan. And my kids were even older at the time, and people used to tease me. And I love that minivan, and it's great for hauling stuff, and it's great for when people come to visit. And it's great for when, I go out and I have a flat in my car and I can pick up the van or vice versa. And the fact that there are two very different cars has really helped me get through this car culture thing. I hardly ever think about like, oh, I'd really like a new car, etc. It just, I enjoy both vehicles, and if I get tired of driving the van, I move into the car, and so it keeps that satiated. The only thing I want in a new car that I don't have in mind is a backup camera, but that's pointless. Anyway, all right. So what do we recommend here? I recommend that you buy over lease because then you own the asset. You're not just a lease is a rental payment. A lease is a rental payment. You're renting that car for 2 to 3 years, okay? I also recommend that you buy for reliability first and then style. There are certainly reliable cars that you could be interested in. The worst car I ever bought was a Land Rover. After a breakup, I was in a bad place, and I went and bought a car to make me feel better. And Lord knows that didn't help, and it cost me a lot of money. I hated that car. The maintenance on that car was incredible. People loved that car, and I will say that the looky loos when you drive in places is it was weird to me. I had not had that before. But it certainly wasn't worth it to me, and it's not worth it to me. Consumer Reports every April comes out with a magazine. It's their auto report. Consumer Reports is a nonprofit company. They buy all the cars that they test, and they do a April magazine that not only looks at the new cars and the ones that they recommend the most, but they have a reliability rating on used cars. They tell you it's a great magazine. You can even get them at half price books from past years. It tells you the cars, if you have $10,000, what are the best used cars, etc., based on reliability, etc. I think a 4-year loan is the max I would ever do. 60, if you're planning on keeping a car for a long time, maybe that's okay. But really 4 to 5 years, I wouldn't go any more than that. And really, I would suggest if you can pay it off in 3, that's the car for you. Keep your car for a minimum of 10 years, or maybe focus on miles, etc. It's going to be a better investment for you. A part of me changing cars every 3.5 years is that a lot of times I would have 4 or 5 year loans, so I'd still owe money on the car when I was trying to get a new one, and so I was what they call upside down, etc. This is a really good table here that you might want to keep a hold of, looking at different. These are kind of budgetary guidelines for different things, even beyond cars. Right. So there's a couple questions. Part 5 of your worksheet is about automobiles and our number 2 expense. All right. So again, go check out your worksheet, hit pause, and come back. Home Sweet Home. This is our biggest investment and our biggest expense. It's the biggest investment because typically real estate has really appreciated at an annual rate of 10.6%, which is a really good return rate. Even the stock market, if it does 7 or 8%, is considered very good. So homes are typically our biggest expense, and they have, for most families, have been a great investment for their future. But a lot of people will keep flipping their home. So, I buy a home for $200,000, stay in it for 5 years, and now it's worth $300,000. I go ahead and buy a bigger home. And so while I did get a profit on that, if I keep up buying, then I'm not realizing that profit because I'm putting that money and I have to, it's a stair step up. In my mind, I want to stair step the other way. I want to hold on to properties, rent them out, etc., so they become passive investments, and then can help me with retirement. Homes are one of the most emotionally charged investments we make. It makes sense, right? We spend a lot of our time there. The bank will focus on monthly costs. They will always focus on a 30-year loan to get you the most house you can get. But you need to be smarter, and you need to think not about the monthly cost, but about the total costs. And a good way to kind of manage that emotion is also when you're thinking about whether you get a 15-year, a 20-year, a 30-year loan, how old will you be when that's paid off? And I think that's a really good break to put on your emotionally charged feelings, etc. One of the most embarrassing things for me is that I made some really good home investments, very low cost homes. One of them I'm still in, and the other one I still own. But I never realized that there were even loans less than 30 years. The first home I bought was in Florida at my first job site, and it was a small condo. It was $29,000, what people would pay for a car, and I still had a 30-year loan on it. So while I love the fact that I was paying like $140, $150 a month, if I was even paying that for my home, I never looked at the total cost. And so while I was like, hey, I'm doing good, I'm only paying $140 rent, If I'd have paid 170 rent, I would have paid that off in 15 years instead of 30. So I paid I paid a lot more money than I needed to. Okay. 90% of homes are bought with a 30-year mortgage, yet 15 and 20-year mortgage save lots of money. And they don't change the value of the house that you're qualified for by much. A lot of times, lenders will tell you the payment that you can, the amount of money you can spend per month. And if you use your TVM calculator and put the payment in, then you can figure out what the present value or what value of home you can buy for is. But they don't change a lot. A lot of people think, well, if it's a 15-year mortgage, that means I'm going to get half the house. That's not necessarily true. So let's look at another example. Emily, now 30, is approved for a $400,000 home loan. Let's see the difference in payment and total amount paid for different terms. So first of all, we're going to look at 15-year, 20-year, and 30-year mortgage. So a 15-year loan is going to have 15 years at 12 payments per month, 20 times 12 for 20 years, 30 times 12 for 30 years, etc. Interestingly, I don't really understand this, but it certainly makes sense because banks charge lower interest for a shorter loan, which means longer loans you pay more interest anyway because you're paying the same payment more times, but you're also paying a higher interest rate. So it's a double whammy, and maybe part of that is just the fact that 90% of homes are bought with that 30-year mortgage. So it's a marketing thing. They know most people are going to want to buy a nicer or bigger house, and so they put the interest rate there. All right. So the future value is zero because we're borrowing $400,000. When we pay it off, there's nothing left. Mortgages you pay at the beginning of the month. And since Emily is now 30, she's waited 10 years to buy her home. In 15 years, she'll be 45. In 20 years, she'll be 50. If she does a 30-year mortgage, she will not have that paid off until she's 60. So there's really little chance of a very early retirement if she's still making a big mortgage payment. So the first one at 15 years, she's making a pretty hefty payment. She's paying $3,253 a month. Okay, so that seems like a lot. And if you look at the other payments, we'll look at those in just a second. But we want to figure out what's the total interest she pays. Now, how do we figure that out? Well, this is what she's paying every month for 15 months times 12. Oh, shoot, what is that? 150, 180, I believe, 180 payments. So we just take 15 times 12 times her payment, and we get $585,540. So she's paying $185,000 in interest. So almost 50% of the value of her house that she bought she's now paying in interest over the next 15 years. It shocks people. They just can't believe that a loan that's 5% at the end of 15 years, you've paid 15%, almost 50% of this money. But if you think that's shocking, let's look at the next one. So almost everyone that does finances and advises people focuses on the payment because that's where most of us are most comfortable. We know what we make each month. We know what we spend each month. And so we focus on the payment, but do not focus on the payment with big purchases. Do not focus on the payment, even with your credit card, etc. Okay, so notice here we've dropped down about $400. So we've saved some money each month, but also realize we are going to be paying this almost $3,000 for an extra 5 years. So at 45, all of a sudden, we no longer have we own our house. We've got no house payment at all. But this guy is going to keep paying for the next 5 years. So while, yes, each month you're saving on the front end, on the back end you're losing big. And how big are we losing? Look now. 20 times 12 is 240 times this payment is $689,000. So now we've got $289,000. We're paying almost 3/4, an extra $100,000 to buy this house, buying it slower over 20 years instead of 15. So instead of paying interest of about 50%, now we're paying interest of about 75%. Let's go to the last one. This is 360 payments. Poor Emily is now 60. She's wanted to retire. She's hated her boss, but she can't because she's still got that mortgage payment. Oh, but that payment looks really good up front. Wow, can I afford this one? I don't know, but this one looks so great. What is that? That's $600, $800 less a month. But let's see what happens. We got 30 times 12 with just 360 payments at that. $886,680. You have now paid more than double what your house was worth at that time. You have paid $300,000 more than you've almost paid double. No, you've paid $300,000 more than what you would have paid for 15 years. And this is, again, that time value of money, that the quicker you can pay off this debt, you are saving so much money in the long run when you're paying an interest fee. So be careful here. It is really easy to look at this and to, again, make decisions around monthly payments versus making better long-term financial decisions, which is really what we all want to make. Obviously, we have to balance the short term and the long term, but you've got to be paying attention to these. So the things that I recommend, I did this, but it was an accident. I bought a condo in Florida because my first job was there. It's right on the edge of Florida State University. It's a small place. When I moved to Dallas 3 years later, I decided to keep it. And really, I was thinking, I've had a company manage it for me. It's given me rental income that whole time, so someone else has bought it. So this is maybe a way to get into the housing market, is to maybe buy your home, buy a retirement home first. Most of us probably don't want a big house at the end. We want a smaller place, maybe no yard, something we don't have to take care of. And it also gets our feet in the door, and possibly like me, you can become a landlord, and then someone else has actually bought that condo for you by the time you get to retirement. Be careful of the emotions that are connected with buying a house. It's a very emotional purchase, especially now with all the HGTV and all these reno programs, etc. I would say that one way to kind of manage that is to make sure you do 3 different calculations. You might be told how much payment you can make a month, and then you can figure out how much house you can buy based on the interest rates and the length of time, etc. And it may be different amounts. It may be that, but it's not typically 400,000 and 200. It might be 400,000 and 350 or something, 350,000. And to save 15 years, to have 15 years without making any of these payments. I mean, imagine that you're 45 and all of a sudden you don't have this payment, you don't have these payments. Imagine the vacation you can take with an extra, $2,500 to almost $3,000 a month. So doing all the payments, also really thinking about how old you will be when that's paid off. This is a great way to kind of temper your emotions. So do all the calculations for the loans and think about your age and the extra money you'll have after it's paid off. Again, aiming for a 15 or 20 year is really what I recommend, staying away from 30. Even right now locally and at this time period, they've been talking about 50-year mortgages, which I think is the biggest mistake in the world. I can't even imagine what people are just going to be stuck paying for their entire life, and that's horrible. There are payment schemes now. Every bank pretty much offers the fact that you can make the same payment, but you make it twice a month. That'll shave probably a year or two. Up of a longer loan, it'll shave probably a year or two off. If you make the same payment each month, but you pay it the 15th and the 30th, that extra early time, a couple weeks early for each of your payments, makes a huge difference. Even if you just make an extra 10% payment, I think my aunt once said that a 30-year mortgage drops to 18 if you just send an extra 10% each time. So there are some calculations in your worksheet for doing Home Sweet Home, or some questions about that. So hit pause again and go to your worksheet. I'm almost finished here. We've only got a few more. Credit cards. It feels like it's free, but it ain't. Most credit cards charge more than 20% interest annually. Okay? Compare this to the 0.01% interest you earn at Chase or Wells Fargo on most of today's community bank savings account. Credit cards are the most expensive debt that people have. Credit cards are the most expensive and heaviest debt that people have. Why is that? Because these are the easiest loans to get. Banks and companies that have credit cards are making so much money, they're making 20%, that they will give them to practically anyone because they can write off even the people that don't pay. Okay? If you do know, though, even if you had a credit card with 28% interest, if you pay off your credit card in full each month, you pay 0 interest. But do not rely on that. If you are not able to pay it off in full each month, you want to be careful here. Also remember, credit unions have better interest credit cards. So if you cannot pay your credit card off each month in full, takes you a couple months, etc., you're better off going to a credit union to get a credit card. But ultimately, you want to be living on cash, and that means that you're paying off your credit card each month. Advertisement focuses on rewards. You see these commercials all the time. Life takes Visa. You deserve it. Go take that vacation, etc. You do not get a free vacation from points on a credit card unless you pay it off every month. Remember, you are paying 20% annual interest, more than 20%, most people are, and you're getting a reward of 1 or 2%. You are not getting a reward if you're paying any interest. You are just paying 19 or 18%. It'd be much better off if you want those points, then you need to pay it off every month, and then you do use those points. It took me a long time to get there. Credit cards was a long way for me to dig myself out of that debt. And now I do use my credit card exclusively. I hardly ever use a debit card. I use my credit card because I pay it off every month. I try to put everything on there, and I use it for points. As a teacher, I have summers off, and if I can fly to Europe with points and fly business, then I'm very, very happy. But I only do that because I now have the means and the fortitude and the knowledge and the savviness to actually pay my credit card off every month. If you're paying just the minimum, this is very, very costly. If you're paying just the minimum, it can take more than 15 years to pay off that balance, and you're typically paying 2.5 times the cost of everything you bought. So you went to dinner, and you had a nice dinner, and you paid $50 for the two of you. Well, think about that. Now you've paid $125 for the two of you for that meal because you're only paying it off very slowly at the minimum amount each month. My bank always recommended that you should use your credit card. It's a good idea to have a credit card first for emergencies. Maybe there are expenses that you have, like your car breaks down and you don't have the money to fix it. Having that credit card is a kind of peace of mind, and it can be your emergency fund until you can make one. She also said, if you have bigger purchases, something you're going to keep for more than 8 years, like let's say you're a young couple and you get an apartment and you need a bed. Well, maybe that's a good time to use your credit card, and don't take 15 years to pay it off. Pay it off as fast as you can, but that would be a reasonable thing that you don't have the cash for to buy. But do not buy Starbucks, do not buy meals, do not pay for the movies. These are things that you need to pay out of the money that you have. You do not want to get in the habit of having these large credit card balances because, and I'll tell you from personal experience, at one point I had like 7 or 8 cards, and they were, I had a hefty amount that it took me a while to dig out. Years. Avoid getting store cards or too many cards or too high of an allowable balance. Each card gives you so much money that you can spend. If at all possible, pay your balance in full. If you cannot do that, have a plan. Make a plan and stick by it to pay that off and get to the point where you're living on cash or you're able to pay your credit card off each month. I say, and this is something I wish I had done, keep your maximum credit card limits. That's not what you're actually borrowing, and that's on there, but the limits. If you're making, let's say, 50,000 a month, then you should have no more credit cards, in my mind, than 10,000. That kind of protects you from getting into too much trouble. This means the most you would ever be in debt is 20% of your annual pay. Okay, so that's a way to kind of manage the debt that, or the maximum debt that you could incur. Credit cards are hell, and I put more information in the worksheet for you to read through. I also feel that credit cards take incredible advantage of poor people. If you look, well, I don't think it's but the people with the least amount of net worth have the highest credit card balances, and especially as a percentage of their overall net worth. It's horrible. The poorer people have more credit, but it's understandable. If you can get a credit card and you don't have a lot of money, it like this heading says, it feels free, but it ain't. So be careful. This is the highest, most expensive debt that anyone has. And who is paying for most of that? Poor people that are on the lower economic scale. Okay. All right. So again, we have a part 7, just a couple questions in your worksheet. For credit cards, the most expensive financial trap. And that's a good way to think about them until you've got the fortitude to manage them correctly. Something very timely for you guys, student loans. I think student loans are a great investment if you invest wisely. I use student loans. I am glad I used student loans, and I didn't do it um, in a wise way. So it took me a while to pay them off, and it definitely limited my life. So 64% of college graduates have student loans. The interest rate is low, and the payoff for a degree is statistically high. That means that the money that you would earn at a job having a college degree is substantially higher than the money you would earn without having a degree. There are different kinds of student loans. Get the right kind. A Stafford student loan or a government loan is what you want to do. You want to avoid private loans from banks. These are higher interest. You normally have to begin repayment right away, whereas with government loans, you don't usually have to begin payment until like 6 months after graduation, and I don't even think they start accruing interest until that period as well. Okay. Borrow only what you need. The school may give you $5,000, but if you don't need $5,000, give it back. This is the mistake, or one of the mistakes that I made. I was working hard in school. I was, I felt entitled. I'm putting in all this time. I'm still working jobs, but, I don't have a lot of extra, and I get this check. Hell, if I wanted to give it back. Later on, when I was paying, and it took me more than 10 years to pay off my student loans, I was really wishing I had not used any of that money for extra stuff that I didn't need, and I gave it back in the front end. Remember, interest, the time value of money. If I had given that money back in the beginning, I probably would have taken a couple years off of my repayment schedule. Okay, if I could have given $3,000 back, kept 2,000, gave in 3,000 back, paid it immediately, and I would have had no interest. All right. So also not only so I took money that I didn't really need. I didn't need a computer. I didn't need to pay for classes or books, etc. So take just what you need. The other thing is don't borrow more than you're likely going to make. So you need to figure out whatever your major is, accountant, nurse, etc. What is the starting salary there? If you don't know, then the average starting salary for someone with a bachelor's degree is $60,000 in 2025. Okay. This is don't borrow more than your salary, but I think you should even go less. I'm going to have a recommendation here in a minute. Borrow and use the funds only as needed. This is what I said before. Loan checks often feel like free money, but if you use it for a vacation or stuff, you will pay for it dearly later. I certainly did. Repayment schedules are 10 years, and they can be quite high monthly payment, depending upon how much you borrow. Paying off 60,000 in 10 years, even with a low interest rate, is not easy on your early career salary. Okay, so know what your approximate future salary is. If you don't know what your job is, then you can use the 60,000. My suggestion would be focus on less than 50%. So the maximum I really want to borrow is $30,000. That will keep my repayment for 10 years after college something that I can usually surely manage and still have money for apartment, car, vacation, etc. It's still going to cut into that, but at least it's manageable. I say the absolute max is 75% of your salary. You don't want to borrow more than you're going to make in a year. You'll never get caught up. It's going to be very hard. So 75% of what your salary is, or 75% of 60,000 is 45,000. And again, as I've already talked about, use for needs and avoid the temptation. This says student loans, and I think I didn't do that right. So I think this is another typo there. Let me see. I'm looking at my papers. Oh man. There is a part 7. It is not credit cards. It is part 7 is credit cards. Part 8 is student loans. So this should say part 8 student loans. How much is too much is what this should say. Okay. All right. That brings us to the end of this. And a little reflection. Let's look back. Look, it's your money and your future, as the title was, your money or your life. But taking it from someone who's been around a while, who's had some experience, get informed and make choices that benefit you both today and tomorrow. No strategies work for everyone. You do you. You first need to figure out your goals. Is a new shirt more important than a zero credit balance or paying interest? Just know that be informed and then find a strategy that works for you and accept responsibility for that. Okay? When you have bigger decisions, more money involved, take more time and effort. Do your research, do your homework, ask yourselves the right questions. Banks and salesmen will not. And don't forget that not all the questions are about money. Like when we talked about buying a house, how old you will be, how much total money you will spend, not just what you will pay every month. That's a huge one. That monthly payment is where everyone keeps their mind and focus. Most of us manage our money month to month. You got to go longer term, especially when you're talking about loans. How much will you pay total? Is it worth it to you? And get started today. TVM, the time value of money, means the sooner you start making better financial decisions, the bigger the rewards will be. So these are some great quotes. Warren Buffett is known as the sage of Omaha, um, one of the richest men in the world. On earning money, never depend on a single income. Make investments to create a second source. On spending, if you buy things you do not need, soon you will have to sell things you need. I love that one. On savings, save first. Do not save what is left after spending, but spend what is left after savings. This again is putting your future ahead. On taking risk, never test the depth of a river with both feet. On investment, do not put all your eggs in one basket. Diversifying your investments. And on expectations, honesty is a very expensive gift. Do not expect it from cheap people. The last thing I just ask you to do is to kind of now, after going through this class, just rate how you feel about your financial literacy and your financial savvy on a scale of 1 to 5. This has been a little bit longer than I intended. This is an hour and a half, but hopefully you found it valuable and that you took breaks and did the worksheet.